I am sure most of us know about the atomic bombings on Japan all the way back in '45. However, people today question the need to use the bombs when Japan was already beaten so badly. I too question the morality of using the bombs in those circumstances, though I would like to look at the question at the time and now with hindsight. But first, an overall simplification of the story for those who do not know. 1945. After the invasion of Okinawa, no one in Japan thought victory could be achieved by any sense of the word. The only thing they can do is hunker down and wait for the Americans to come to them, and hope that they can take as many down with them as possible. The plan was more or less to bleed the Americans dry and hope that Japan as a nation still exists in one form or another when the Americans finally gave up. With the previously mentioned island of Okinawa, the Americans now have a good staging ground for the invasion of the mainland. And let it be known that Japan wanted the invasion of the home islands to make Okinawa look like a tea party. I'll talk about that near the end. Now, this was the thought process of the Japanese government, but all of that changed in the course of a week. To make it fast, August 6th, 1945, the first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, unleashing what was until then an unbelievable amount of energy. 3 days later, August 9th, the Soviets invaded Manchuria. Now we have a two-front war, and this is looking less than ideal for Japan. Well, if you thought that was a bad day for the Japanese government, that same day the second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to skip a lot of internal politics of the government trying to agree to do something, and just skip to the surrender recordings from the Emperor Hirohito on the 15th. In that speech, he cited the bombs as a reason to surrender, but later on the 17th, Hirohito made a short speech asking the army to surrender, because most of them flat out refused to do so. Here he cited the Soviet invasion. When it came to the people on the home islands, he mentioned the bombs because that directly affected them. When he was talking to the army, he mentioned the Soviets because that directly affected them. The surrender was not necessarily one or the other, but I would say both. Okay, back to the bombs. At the time, the bombs were not looked at as a key to ending the war, but rather a new piece of the puzzle. One option was the bomb being the opening to the invasion. Drop it on the beachhead, obliterating all defenses in the location for the invasion force to punch deep and fast. The effects of radiation were not really understood, but that was a possibility. Now, another reason for the atomic bombs was to show the enemies of America the power they wielded. So, some say that the bomb could have been dropped on an uninhabited mountainside in sight of a city to get the point across. Sorry, but I do not find this to be very realistic. The bombs are incredibly expensive, so if they are going to be built and flown over there, they are going to be dropped on a city to really get the point across. It doesn't really matter if you like it or not. Dropping the bomb on a population center is much more effective than blowing up a mountain. But, did the bombs need to be used in the first place? Being invaded on two fronts would not be the best time for anyone involved. It would not be far-fetched to say that the threat of invasion on two fronts would have led to a surrender. This could be possible, but I cannot say one way or the other. But, nevertheless, the atomic bomb was to be the shock-and-awe weapon, and it was very much that for those who saw it. Not only that, but you best believe that the government just wanted to drop the bombs to see what would happen if nothing else. To pretend the US government did not want to justify the overwhelming cost of making the bombs would be idiotic at the least. So I would say the morality of dropping the bomb was dubious at best. But I do not believe that is the whole story. The atomic bombings looked at as a singular event is horrific, yes. But, in the greater context of war, is it much worse than anything else? Here, to the left, I have a picture of Hiroshima after the bomb, and to the right, I have a picture of the Tokyo firebombing aftermath. As you can see, they're somewhat similar. Oh, and by the way, I just lied. Hiroshima is on the right, Tokyo is on the left. Now, we can have a debate on if the A-bomb or the firebombs were worse, but I for one say that the firebombs were worse by a fair bit. For the A-bomb, it was one and done. Yes, that one and done was the equivalent of 15 to 20 kilotons of TNT, but after the blast, most of the damage was done. Yes, people did die later on from what the bomb did to them, whether it be burns, radiation, or so on. But the firebombing? I'm not going to go into specifics, but the fire burned for days. and the casualties were as much as 130,000 people. I do not want to talk about what firebombing a city does to the people who live within it. But if you really want to know, you can look up the firebombing of Hamburg, and you can get an idea of what firebombing looks like. In short, I believe that the atomic bombing wasn't much, if at all, worse than firebombing. Let us go back again and have a little hypothetical. The Soviets are running through Manchuria with a massive US invasion fleet just off the coast, and the British are ready to retake their holdings in the east. With all of this going on, the Japanese government surrenders to the United States before they launch their invasion force. Assuming all goes to plan, the world does not need to know about the destructive power of the atomic bomb, at least for now. Well, let's be honest, Korea will still happen. But this time without the context of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, MacArthur might get his way. Now instead of 100,000 to 200,000 dead, there would be a minimum of 500,000 across North Korea. He would have dropped 30 or so nukes on air bases and across the land border with China. According to the man himself, there would be a belt of radioactive cobalt across the border, preventing a land invasion of Korea for no less than 60 years. Well, at least with this option, most of the casualties would be combative. But with no less than 30 nukes across the Korean peninsula, the devastation would be much worse. And, most terrifyingly of all, nukes will be used openly on a massive scale in open conflict, setting a new precedent for the usage of nuclear munitions in warfare. With what we know now, Hiroshima and Nagasaki was the best options, even if we do not like it. It was the lesser evil, as I see it. I would like to give one more perspective before going into the final points, that being the soldiers and the US populace. If you were a soldier on the European front going home after the surrender of Germany, but then you're told that you are now going to the Pacific front, you would be rather mad, putting it lightly. If we need to invade Japan proper, unlikely it may seem, I think the soldiers would just be done with it all. They would want to go home, and who can blame them? I think morale would be very, very low. Now to the US populace. Again, assuming that we need to invade Japan, or at a minimum blockade, more men would have died. Now if it were your son who got the short straw, and was killed, and you later learn that the government had a bomb that could have ended the war sooner, you'd be pissed, and rightfully so. Even if it's only a couple hundred or so more deaths, the populace would be outraged. In later elections, people would be more likely to vote people in that would use the bomb next time to avoid needless American deaths. I know that we are talking about hypotheticals within hypotheticals, but I still believe it is important to think about. Remember at the beginning when I said I would talk about Okinawa? Now is that time. Okinawa was, by all metrics, a bloodbath. Around 500,000 Allied, and around 84 to 117 Japanese casualties, with around 100,000 to 150,000 civilian casualties, with either crossfire, execution, or letting gravity do the work, if you understand what I'm trying to say. I am telling you all of this because we do not know for 100% fact that Japan would have surrendered without needing a mainland invasion. But if anywhere from 180,000 to 265,000 Japanese died for a little island, well, only the Almighty knows the death toll that an invasion would have brought to the people of Japan. Even with all this being said, you can still disagree with what I said, and I will not say that you are wrong, because I do not know. No one knows. But what we all can agree on is that nukes aren't just another class of weaponry. Every new invention of warfare, it is said that this would be the end of it. War would be too costly, but every time they're wrong. The musket, the Gatling gun, the repeating rifle, the long-range artillery, the machine gun, the tank, the bomber aircraft. Every time it was meant to end war, but every time it has made it much, much worse. But the nuke? Now we are in territory of complete annihilation. So maybe this time, nukes can at least have people think twice. Now, take care.